Hello, everybody, and welcome. We have a super fun webinar to learn about today, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So today we will be learning about how to correct relationships and different things in our own family trees. And the objective of today's webinar is to learn how to effectively correct relationship errors in the FamilySearch family tree through best practices and analysis. And so what is super amazing is that the goal of FamilySearch is to create one gigantic family tree for all of mankind. We want to include everybody, and we want it to be a large collaborative effort, and we want people to be able to have their own person profile, and we don't want any duplicates, and we want it as correct as possible. However, as you can imagine, because it is such a large collaborative effort, errors are inevitable just because no one is perfect. I know I'm not the smartest person in the world, and I've been doing family history for quite some time, but I make a lot of mistakes. So some of those errors may include duplicate individuals listed in the same family, incorrect parent-child relationships, and individuals who don't belong in the particular family you are researching. These problems can be resolved by deleting duplicate relationships, merging, and through careful analysis. So, kind of what I just talked about. The best part about FamilySearch is that because it is so collaborative, we can always edit, we can add information, we can change information, and we can always redo things. So I don't want this webinar to scare you, to make you feel like you're doing something incorrect, but instead to teach you how to do the best practices of analysis so that when you are looking at it, you can make your most sure assumptions available and you have the evidence to back it up. And I just want everyone to know that even if you do happen to make a mistake, despite your best efforts, you still can edit. So a really good question to ask is, when should I fix relationships? Sometimes it's not easy to tell when someone is connected to the wrong person or family, especially when you're working with someone with a family that has a lot of similar names or similar last names. Sometimes it can be hard, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the biggest and most important thing to do is analysis. And so I know sometimes you can get super excited and we want to get jumping into it and we want to start working on things immediately and we want to start changing things to our family tree. But sometimes the best thing that we can do is to pause, take a breath, and just really look at what the tree is telling us and what a person's profile page is telling us. So some things that we can do to decide if two people are the same individual and in the same family tree are to do the following. So we can carefully review all of the following information. So names, dates, and places of the person and family members. So names are super important. And as you can imagine, names can be spelled incorrectly. Names can include a middle name or not include a middle name. A long time ago in like the 19th, 20th century, and even like before that, if you're really going that far back, spelling was not standardized. So names were often spelled phonetically and they were spelled incorrectly or just not the same many times. And back then, like, who was to determine what was spelled correctly or not, just because there was no standardization. Like my last name, Polson, is spelled a million different ways. And so when you're looking at someone and you're not sure, always keep in mind that maybe their name is just misspelled. Another thing to keep in mind is that people went by middle names or nicknames, and sometimes it's hard to determine. And so when you're looking at things, always just keep in mind, like, maybe the name is spelled incorrectly. Like, instead of this being two separate people, what if we imagine them being the same one, and just playing it out before you like make any direct assumptions about, oh yes, like the name is spelled similarly enough, they must be the same person. Make sure you have evidence to back it up, like documents or time and place. So the next thing we have are dates and places. And so if you have someone named, let's see, Thomas Smith, and he was born in 1820, and you have another Thomas Smith who was also born in 1820, but his name was spelled a little bit different, and the two places are from opposite counties in the state that you're working in, it is safe to assume that they are two different people, because keep in mind the context of the time period that you're researching. People are not going to be traveling long distances. Most likely, of course, there are always outliers, but it is most common that people stay within a pretty close geographical area from when they're born. They don't make big, drastic moves. And so same with dates. A lot of times, especially back then, in many cultures, I would say, I have done US research, and I've also done Mexican research and South American research and just all sorts of research from different places. It was very common for, if a baby were to die in childbirth or in early infancy, if they were to die, their parents would reuse their name for their next living child, just because they wanted to keep that name within the family. And so keep in mind name, dates, and places, and just look for little discrepancies. Sometimes they're going to be extremely obvious, and sometimes they won't. But every single discrepancy deserves to be analyzed and carefully researched, just because you never know. Because FamilySearch is such a collaborative tree, someone with the best intention of their heart may include incorrect information, so just keep an eye on that. Another important thing are reason statements, and I can show you a little bit as we start getting into examples how to create a reason statement. But anytime you make a change, you add a source, or you correct something, before you are able to complete that step, FamilySearch will give you a little box option that allows you to type in a reason statement. And what this means is you have a place to kind of explain the change that you're making. And this is so vital every single time you correct a relationship or correct anything in your family tree. This reason statement will be public and viewable by everyone. And it's your chance to explain why you're making a certain change. So back to our Thomas Smith example, if this person were to have been combined and you were to separate them because you performed the research and saw that there is no possible way that they could exist at the same time because they were in two different locations, you can just say, I have separated these two individuals because despite having the same name and the same birth year, they were born in two opposite locations, and that it would be impossible. And you can provide further evidence through sources. And so that brings us to the next point, is records and sources are so important. They will really help you cement your reason statement and to affirm why you've made a change. And within your reason statement, you can always direct someone to view a particular source that you're talking about. But anytime you want to make any change, it is the best practice to have a source to back it up. I know that there are some situations where you may not have a source, and those are far and few between. So if you don't happen to have a source that proves or affirms the change that you're making, make sure your reason statement is extremely clear, because we want to prevent as much confusion as possible. We just want to make it super clear. Other things that you can look at are discussions and notes. I will show you where notes can appear on individuals as we get further into the webinar. And just keep an eye out on like the life sketch and the relationships. Like, we want to be looking at all aspects of a person's life. What was their occupation? How many children did they have? Did they have multiple wives? Just different things, so that when you do come across an individual and you're looking at their children or their wife, and you see a name that, I'm not quite sure if that belongs, just because of other records that you have found, just keep an eye on any weird things or anything that brings anything to your attention. And hopefully that discrepancy is true and it just happens to be a weird part of research in your ancestor's life. But if not, if it does happen to be a true error, at least you know, like at least you checked it. So analysis is really, the way I like to describe it in simple terms, is looking for the weird, odd, conflicting information or facts in your family tree, and looking to see, like, why does this conflict, or why is this so different from what I've been led to believe? So another thing that is super awesome is that FamilySearch can help you with that. So FamilySearch is incredible, and we have such amazing engineers working with us, and they will show you little icons within your family tree to point out like, hey, there is a problem here. So this red exclamation point, data problems, will show up within your family tree. Now I will show you once I get into my own tree, and this will indicate possible duplicates, errors in dates, like if someone was born after they were married or a child was born before the father, things like that. Missing standardized event, place, or date, or if the person is over 120 years old. Just because, I mean, it's very unlikely for a person to be over 120 years old, so the system will flag it. And if a child is born before the father was even born, then that's another big red flag. And just really quickly, so standardizing event places and dates is super important just because we want dates and places to be easily searchable by everyone. So we want to have the same format, and I will go a little bit into that, but typically we want to lead with the date, the month, and then the year, just so it's all one place. And if you can see on the right of the screen, I'm not sure if my mouse is showing up as I'm sharing my screen, but the data problems, the red exclamation point, will show up in research help on someone's page. And I will show you that we're getting close to the end of this little PowerPoint, and then I can show you all of these things. So another awesome hint is this purple little crossroads. This one's super awesome, and this kind of helps guide your analysis. So research suggestions. So there's possible missing child, couple may have children, person may have another spouse, no sources attached, missing vital event, or possible records. So if you see over here, an example is there's a gap of 3 or more years between the birth of one child and the next sibling. And so typically, this is definitely not the case for every single person, but typically, commonly, generally, people would have children every 1 to 2 years back then. And so if the system will flag like there's a gap of 10 years between 2 children, it's possible that you're missing children. Or if there's another spouse, like say there's a record that lists another spouse, like a death record on someone's tree, they can say, hey, you should look into this because another person is attached, and things like that. So I'm going to skip this example because I'm going to show you some of my own examples, but here are some commonly seen practices overall throughout quite a few different cultures and countries. Like these are pretty common despite where your ancestors come from. So children are typically born 1 to 2 years after a marriage. They honestly can even be born slightly before the marriage, like right on the marriage. Just around that time, you can expect children to be born. So you can start looking after once you find a marriage date for your ancestors, you can start looking pretty closely between that year. Another thing is children are born 2 years apart, like I previously mentioned. This is just common practice. Like we've seen this pattern so many times. Another thing is vital events happen where the family lived. I know now that I would say for the most part nowadays traveling long distances is pretty easy. We have trains, we have cars, we are able to travel many miles pretty quickly. Back then, however, it was very cumbersome to make these journeys. And so if a child was born, their vital record, their birth certificate was recorded in the county office or the town office where that birth took place. Or if they were baptized, it happened within the parish boundaries of where they were living. It was very, very rare for someone to travel and record it outside. Of course, there are always exceptions, as I found, but for the most part, you can keep these general patterns in mind. Another commonly seen practice is that widowers often remarried, especially if they had small children. So if you have someone in your family tree and you know that the wife dies and she leaves behind 5 young children, unfortunately, maternal mortality rates were very high back in the day just because there wasn't modern medicine and we were not quite as advanced. if you see, like if you have an ancestor and you know the wife dies and you're not sure if the husband remarried, I would always assume that if there was young children around, to just look and to keep an eye out, because it was very hard for men to support the family while also caring for young children. I do know that we live in a society that so many more things are possible just because of modern advancements. But back then, like a man that was working really relied on someone to take care of his children while he was providing. So he would most likely have been remarried. Another thing that I've a little bit mentioned before is naming patterns. So if one of the young children died shortly after they were born and they had a sibling born again, it's possible that the family just used the exact same name. I've seen this in my own family tree because a lot of people wanted to keep family names within the tree. Another thing is that sometimes families all have the exact same middle name. I've seen that in a lot of my own research, like especially in Brazil and Mexico. The women all had the first name Maria, and then they had a different middle name, but they were referred to as their middle name. So that can be common as well. If your ancestors were particularly religious and they were members of whichever congregation, sometimes they would have a saint's name and then their real name, and they were referred to by their saint's names on all documents within the church. And then in all like vital records, government records, and things like that, they were referred to as their real name. So just keep an eye out that like certain naming patterns do exist. And I will say that naming patterns are a little bit more specific or niche to the country and culture that you're researching. So my rule of thumb whenever I'm getting into a new region that I'm not super familiar with is I would just Google like 19th century naming patterns in the United States or in the UK, because everywhere will be slightly different and you'll just want to familiarize yourself with naming patterns as you do research and analysis, so that if you see anything odd or strange, you can have an explanation if it is something that is commonly seen. So now let's get into some examples. So let me switch my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay, let's see. What are you seeing? Let me stop sharing really quickly and then I will start resharing. Okay, so right now you should be seeing my family tree on my FamilySearch profile. I hope that it is large enough for everyone to see. And so something that I recommend is having your tree view in landscape. So I can even show you how I got here. So we'll go back. So this is the main FamilySearch homepage. And to get to your family tree, you'll just select Family Tree and then Tree right here. And then you'll see here, and you'll be in landscape. Something I always recommend is having in landscape, because if you look at this little icon right here, if you hover over it, it'll say options. My mouse hand is kind of blocking it. You can click on that, and it will show you what you want to be seen. And so I always make sure everything is visible. So I have this checked and all of this. So that means record hints will appear, research suggestions will appear, and data problems will appear. And then you can also have like portraits, which is always fun, marriages and children, and things like that. But these three are the most important that I always recommend having, just because it will help you the most. And as you can see here, as I open it, I have lots and lots of record hints. And if I go here, we can see there's some data issues. And let's see if there's any purple. And then we have some, and then we have some purple ones right over here. So I did some researching and I found some errors within my own family. And so I will make this a little bit larger. And so as I was looking for an example, I stumbled across this family. So Charles Ernest Smith and Mabel Evelyn Allison. And if you can see here, he was born in 1877. She was born in 1882. And their first child was born in 1873, which is a red flag since he was born before his father. But even more than that is you can see that all of the other children were born like 1906, 1907, 1910, 1912, and 1915. So all of these children follow that 1 to 2 to 3 year gap in age. And it looks like they were married in 1903, and this child was born in 1906, which also kind of follows that pattern. So who is Watson Glee, and why on earth is he a part of this family? So if we go ahead and click on him, and we will go to his person page, you can see right here, so we're on his main person page, and we are in details. And we can see right here immediately in research help these red exclamation points. And it says the child's birth year is listed before the father's birth year and is listed before the mother's birth year. And so what we need to do is figure out what is going on and why this person is attached here. And I will just say that after you've determined or found errors that exist within a family like this one that we see, there are a couple ways to resolve them, so I'll go through those. But before changing anything, sometimes it can be helpful to just write things down, like writing down names, ID numbers, and relationships of the ancestors involved. Because yes, you can always change something that you fixed, but sometimes when you get into the thick of it, you can kind of lose track of where you are at. And so it's helpful to write down who is the original family that I'm working on, and then creating another tree of who do I think it belongs to, just so that you can visualize it as you're changing, so that if you get interrupted or if you lose track. I know my brain, sometimes I cannot grasp how complex some things are, and so I just need to write them down. And so in my opinion and experience, it can be helpful to have a visual of the family and where the errors exist. And just always remember that you can always view a list of recent changes to any individual and undo any changes if you make a mistake. So we will just get started. And the first thing that I look at when I see a major error like this is I look at this top ribbon right here. I look at how many sources does this person have, how many collaborators are there, and are there any memories? And so sources, he has 7 sources, which is very promising, which means I can look at these and I can see if someone misinterpreted the information or what may have occurred. Collaborate. So this tab just shows you all of the different people working on this person. And so as you can see, no one is working on this person, which is, it can be a good thing or a bad thing. Sometimes when you have a lot of different collaborators working on the same person, mistakes can be made just because the more hands there are in the pot, it can become a little bit confusing. But on the other hand, if you have a ton of collaborators that do perform the proper analysis, that do find the proper records and sources, it can be incredible because they're working on so much of your family history and you can all work together. And then I like to look at memories, and I like to treat it as another location for information. So sources and memories can have clues for you to analyze and different things, and then collaborate will just give you an idea of who is working on this person. So I'm just going to look down here, and I'm going to look to see his name, where he was born, and where he died, and just different information. It looks like he was born to these people. So let's go to sources. And let's look and see. So it looks like Watson Glee Allison was found in the household of M. Allison. So let's go ahead and click on this. And an important tidbit of information to keep in mind that you can write down or just even keep in mind to Google is that censuses are incredible sources of information for proving relationships. However, only starting in the 1850 census did they start listing relationships to say so-and-so is this person's son or things like that. So this one is the 1880 census, and so we can be sure that a relationship will be added. And it's interesting because this is W.G. Allison when we're looking at W.G. Smith, or Watson Glee Smith. So another thing to keep in mind is names. So we have Watson Glee, which matches W.G., but where does this Smith and Allison come from? And so we'll look at that. And if you remember from before, his supposed or alleged mother's last name was Allison. So in your initial analysis, just briefly peruse the names and the places and the times. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to memorize everything, but just kind of keep in mind what is happening at the beginning of your analysis. So we'll go and we'll click on this and we'll scroll down and we can look at some information. So we have W.G. Allison. He's a male. He's 6 years old. He was born in Missouri. And we'll see all of these things, and we'll see his father. We'll see all of the different people that are listed on this record. So that's his father, the initials of his mother, and we have some different siblings. Now, typically what I would recommend is always clicking on the image or finding another one. So as you can see, this one says image unavailable. And so what I would do is, it's possible that whoever attached this record just attached the incorrect one. What I'm assuming is happening is that because I'm in beta FamilySearch, this just means that any changes I make today won't affect my permanent family tree, just for the purpose of like examples of this class. So that's possible why you're not seeing it, but always look for the image if possible. So let's go and look at another one. So that gave us some information, and let's look at something else. And so we see Watson Glee Smith, and here it is, and it's attached to this person. And again, image is unavailable, but I think it's because I'm in beta. I personally have looked at these records before, like in preparation, I've done the research, and all of the information that is said, given here on the index, matches what the image says. So let's go back to the census because this is what gives us the most family information, and let's see who this is. It looks like his father was born in Kentucky and his mother was born in New York, and then a lot of his siblings were born in Illinois and Kansas. And so he was born in Missouri, and I know that there's lots of places mentioned and they're all somewhat close together. So if you do see location changes, it's not a huge red flag, but it is possible. So after we kept in mind like who we saw in that record, let's look at his mother, or his alleged mother that he is attached to. And let's look at her just because she has the same name. And so let's go down, and it looks like her dad is Manuel E. Allison, which could be the M. E. Allison we saw in that record. And her mother's name is Martha Elizabeth Firth, which was the M. E. Allison again. And let's look at some of the siblings that are already attached to her. We have Lena, Flora, Harold, and Burton. And let's click on her sources. So again, we're going to look at our top, and it looks like she has 26 sources, which are super great. There are no collaborators and no memories, so there's no other information that we can look for. But let's look at her sources. She was born after 1880, so it's possible that she doesn't have anything. So let's see. Yeah, so by 1910, she was already married. So let's go back. So this is the analysis. You're going to be going back and forth, and sometimes it's helpful to have multiple tabs open. Because I can only share one screen at a time, I'm just going to be going back and forth. But you can see, keep in mind, who are her parents and who are her siblings. So we'll go back to her child, or her supposed child, Watson Glee. We'll go back to his person page, and we'll go to sources, and it pops at us up here. And we can see that, oh, there's an M. Allison listed as his father and M. E. Allison as his mother. And then we see Burton and H. Allison, Lena, and a Flora. And if you remember, I'll even go back to his sister, or to his supposed mother. Those exact same people show up, but instead as siblings. So what we can determine is that Watson Glee Smith is actually the older brother, I might add, of Mabel Evelyn Allison. And so this is how we can fix that. if you look at this little pencil here, this means edit. And so if you can see throughout all of his, we're still on Mabel, Evelyn, Allison's page, and so I'll go back to his, but for the sake of just showing you, next to every piece of information, there is a pencil, and that will allow you to edit that specific information. My mouse is enlarged, but if you hover over it, you can see that it will say like edit death. And if I hover over him, it will say edit parents of Watson Glee Smith. And another thing I'd like to point out is right here where it says non-standardized place, this is a little red flag. And so you see the residence as same house. So same house is not a real location in the real world. Instead, you would put something like the town, the county, the state, and then the country. And so you can always edit that. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into that, but just know that if there's anything wrong with your tree, you can see, it'll tell you, and then it will help you out. But let's go back to here. And so what can we do to move Watson Glee Smith back over to his family? And so something I like to do for myself is write things down. So we know that Watson Glee is actually the son of Manuel E. Allison and Martha Elizabeth Firth. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write down their identification codes. This is called their PID code. And every single person that exists in the tree, even if there are duplicate profiles, every single profile that has ever been made has their own personal identification number. And if you delete a person, if you merge a duplicate, doesn't matter. That specific ID number still exists in some capacity, and you can redeem it, like renew it. So don't be afraid to make edits. And a really helpful little tool that you can do, or a little hack, is that if you click on it, if you just left click on it, it will immediately copy the ID. So I'm going to do that right now. So I have written it down so I can keep track of his real parents. And I've also copied the one for his father. And so I'm going to click on Watson Glee Smith, and I'm going to click on the edit pencil because I want to edit his parents. And this is what I see. So this is a parent-child relationship between Charles Ernest Smith and Mabel Evelyn Allison, and we know that this is wrong. So we want to remove or replace it. But before I do that, I want to show you another really cool thing about correcting relationships. Since we've clicked on the edit relationship, we can add a relationship type. And so there are quite a few different ways, like you can add an adoptive, biological, foster, guardianship, or step. And this is super important because I know even in my own family, like there are people that have been adopted, and just in my personal opinion, the more information you have about your family history, like the better. And so if you can clarify like what kind of relationship it is, it's even better. And if you notice right here, if you notice the box below, this is the reason statement that we were talking about at the very beginning. So you can provide a reason for why the information is correct. So that's another little thing that you can do. So what I want to do is I want to remove or replace the parents. So what I want to do, so it says remove father, remove the parent from the relationship, replace the father, remove the parent from the relationship and replace that person with a different one. Preserve all sources and notes. And so it will say, I have reviewed the relationships, sources, and notes for these individuals. And they require you to check this box because they want to make sure you did your due diligence and that you properly analyze the person, you analyze the information, and you know that what you're doing is correct. So what I want to do is I want to select replace father. And you can either do it by name. So I could do it by Manuel Allison, or I could do it by ID number. And remember, I've already copied it, so I can put it right there and hit next. And there he is. So possible matches found, Manuel E. Allison and his spouse, Martha Elizabeth Firth. So I'm going to add this match. And then it's going to say, reason this information is correct. And you can type in your own reason statement. You can also do suggested reason statement, and I'll read a couple of these. So many sources, photos, stories, or documents provide evidence that this information should be changed. Some sources provide evidence, or a source provides evidence. And I'll just say in the 1880 census, he is found living within their household. His birth year and location from the census matches other information found in his sources. His siblings also match. He was previously, And so this is what you are looking for in a reason statement. You want to say like where you're getting the information from and what does the information say. And so in the 1880 census, he is found living within their household, meaning his parents. His birth year and location from the census matches other information found in his sources, so like his draft card, other censuses. His siblings also match, and then he was previously attached as a child of his sister, and we can even include her name of Mabel Evelyn Allison. And then we'll select replace. And so now you can see him. So I don't know if you saw that little change that happened here. So here we are in Charles Ernest Smith, Mabel Evelyn Allison, and he has since disappeared from their children and now appears, or should appear, right here, but we haven't quite finished locating, we haven't finished replacing his mother, so he only is showing up under his father. So if we click on him, we can see here that this relationship shows up. So we haven't quite finished. So he's still attached to his sister because we're not quite done. So this is his family, his real family, Manuel E. Allison and his mother, all of his siblings, but he doesn't appear in this list because his mother is still attached to his sister, Mabel Evelyn. So we're going to click on it again. Oh, first I'm going to copy his mother's ID. And then I'm going to click on the little pencil. And I'm going to do remove or replace again. So just we're following along. We're going to remove or replace. And then we're going to say, yes, I have reviewed all of this information. We're going to do replace mother. By ID number, we're going to paste that. And there she is. And we'll fix that little unknown name in a second. We're going to add this match. And I'm just going to click on that for the sake of time, and we'll select replace. So there we go. Now he disappeared again. And if you see here, so now we're on Manuel E. Allison. That's his father. There's his mother. And there he is. So let's click on his person page and let's see what comes up. It looks like those research helps disappeared. And it looks like he now has his real parents and he's connected to the right people. Some other things that you may come across while you're researching is duplicate individuals. We have an amazing webinar on merging duplicates, and so please watch that if you have any questions on how to merge two duplicates. But we just went over what to do if a person doesn't belong in a family. Watson Glee Smith definitely did not belong in the same family with his sister as the mother. And so that is everything you need to know about how to edit relationships. You just click on, you go to the person's person page, we go to details, we go to the relationship that we want to fix. So we'll click on the pencil if we want to edit his parents, or if we want to correct someone's marriage, like for example, this marriage, we can edit right here. And we can remove or replace. And the process is pretty similar. So you can add a reason. Here's your reason statement, and then remove or replace. And it will always ask you what you want to do. So before I open it up to questions, something that you can look at is on someone's person page on the left-hand side, you can see latest changes. You can see that I just did all of them. Let's see, let's go far down. Okay, so like you can see like relationship added, this was done in 2019, different things. So we can see all the way down until this person was created even. So do not be like nervous that you're going to mess something up. Like it will, like FamilySearch will keep track of every change, and you can always redo it and things like that. And then I mentioned at the very beginning that we can add a note, and this is how we do that. And so correct parents, and we will say Watson G. Smith is related, or I'll just say father is Manuel Allison and is not Mabel Evelyn Allison. That is his sister. Oops. So the note feature is super helpful just because it's a collaborative tree, many people can be editing information. And so if you save that, you'll see here, let me refresh this page. That is really strange. It should pop up right here, but it's possible that it is not because I'm in the beta version. But if you look now, it says collaborate. You can click on that and you can see that right here, like this is why I made that change. This is just an FYI to everybody. And if you don't want to look at it right there, you can also see it right here. Correct parents.